In a moment that stunned a live audience and sent shockwaves across the country, a bold political figure hurled a racially charged insult, telling a sitting Congresswoman to go back to Africa. But what happened next? No one could have predicted it. The response wasn't loud, it was powerful, and it left even her harshest critics silent. Stay tuned, because this isn't just a political clash, it's a moment rewriting the rules of public discourse. In the world of politics, words carry more weight than most people realize. What is said publicly, especially during debates or interviews, can shape opinions, influence laws, and even define careers. But sometimes, words are used not to build understanding or share ideas, but to attack and insult. When someone in a public position uses a deeply offensive phrase like, "Go back to Africa," it does not just hurt the person it's aimed at. It also opens a painful wound for millions of others who have heard those same words in classrooms, workplaces, or on the street. The phrase is not new. It's part of a long, hateful history in the United States. For generations, people have used that line to push Black Americans to the margins, to make them feel like outsiders in their own country. The words are not just personal, they are political. They imply that no matter how educated, successful, or patriotic a person is, their skin color makes them less American. It's a way of saying, you don't belong here. And that is one of the most powerful forms of exclusion there is. What makes this kind of statement especially dangerous when spoken by a public figure is the platform that person has. Their words are heard not just by the person in the room, but by millions of viewers, voters, and followers. When a racial insult is broadcast nationally, it risks normalizing racism under the cover of free speech. It sends a message to some that it's okay to repeat such ideas. It tells others, especially young people of color, that their identity is something to be questioned or rejected. The moment such a phrase is used in a public forum, it no longer remains just an individual insult. It becomes a cultural signal. It tells society who is included and who is excluded. And when those words go unchallenged, it damages more than the person being attacked. It weakens the values of fairness and equality that the country claims to stand for. To fully understand how harmful this type of language is, one must look at its roots. The "Go Back to Africa" insult did not start in recent years. It was used during the civil rights era to intimidate people demanding equal treatment. It was used during school desegregation, during protests, and even in daily conversations, to make Black Americans feel unwelcome. It was a way to silence voices and discourage people from participating in civic life. Saying someone should go back suggests they were never truly a part of the nation to begin with. A cruel lie that ignores the fact that many Black families have deeper roots in America than those of their critics. Using such language in a political setting also undermines the purpose of public debate. Democracy depends on strong disagreement, on the exchange of ideas and beliefs. But when arguments are replaced with racism, real dialogue disappears. The focus moves away from policies, laws, and solutions and turns into personal attacks based on race or identity. This doesn't just harm the person being targeted, it drags down the quality of the entire debate and makes politics feel more like a fight than a forum for growth. In that sense, the use of a phrase like this is not just an attack on one person, but an attack on democratic values. It disrespects the idea that every citizen, regardless of race, has the right to speak, to lead, and to shape their country. It tries to draw a line between who is truly American and who is not, based not on values or actions, but on skin color. That is not only unfair, it's dangerous. The true danger lies in how these words ripple across society. When people in power use them, they create permission for others to repeat them. Racism becomes more acceptable, more mainstream, more common. Children hear it and wonder what it means. Some feel ashamed, others repeat it. The cycle continues unless someone breaks it. And breaking it starts with understanding just how serious these words are. When a racist insult like "Go Back to Africa" is spoken on a public stage, it reveals more than a moment of disrespect. It exposes deep problems in how society views race, belonging, and power. It challenges us to think about who we listen to, what we tolerate, and how we respond. It shows that even now, in a country built on the promise of equality, there are still people willing to use old hate to silence new voices. And that is a lesson worth learning, not just for the person who said it, but for everyone watching. The moment a racist comment is made, many people look toward the person targeted to see how they will respond. Some expect anger, others expect silence. But sometimes the response is something completely unexpected, something that changes the conversation in a powerful way. That is exactly what happened when a Black Congresswoman, known for her sharp mind and strong voice, was publicly insulted with the phrase, "Go back to Africa." Instead of reacting with rage or letting the insult go unchecked, she delivered a calm, thoughtful, and deeply moving response that surprised not only those present, but also millions watching across the country. Her response did not include yelling or personal attacks. She did not return the insult or lower herself to the same level of hate that was thrown at her. Instead, she chose to speak with dignity, clarity, and strength. She reminded everyone listening of her roots, her contributions, and her right to stand where she was. With careful words, she pointed out that she, like many Black Americans, is just as much a part of the nation as anyone else. Her ancestors helped build the country, often without thanks or recognition, and her presence in Congress was not a favor. It was earned through education, dedication, and hard work. Rather than focusing on the attack, she focused on the bigger picture. She spoke about what it means to be American and how racism, both subtle and obvious, has been used to exclude people like her for generations. But instead of sounding bitter, she sounded determined. She turned the moment into a lesson, not just for the person who insulted her, but for every viewer, student, and citizen paying attention. She reminded everyone that racism doesn't win when it's met with loud anger. It loses when it's met with truth. What made her response so powerful was the way she used history and facts to make her point. She spoke about the experiences of Black Americans across time, about their fight for justice, and about the many times they were told to leave a country they helped shape. She asked why people who have given so much are still treated like they don't belong. And by asking that question in such a calm and respectful way, she put the burden of reflection on the audience. She didn't ask for pity, she asked for understanding. This approach caught many people off guard, especially those who expected her to get emotional or defensive. But her self-control became part of the message. It showed that true strength doesn't always come from shouting back. Sometimes it comes from standing tall, speaking clearly, and refusing to be shaken. It showed that even in the face of hate, a person can choose grace. The moment quickly went viral. Clips of her speech were shared online by both supporters and critics. But no matter who shared it, one thing was clear. She had handled the situation in a way that earned respect from all sides. News channels began to replay her response, and commentators from across the political spectrum noted the power of her words. Some described it as one of the most composed and effective responses to public racism they had ever seen. Schools and universities also began to take notice. Teachers used her words in classrooms to teach about civil discourse and the importance of remaining grounded under pressure. Her response became more than just a political moment. It became a teaching moment. Students learned that when faced with hate, they don't have to respond in kind. They can respond with facts, with pride, and with purpose. The impact of her response did not stop with the cameras. It sparked conversations in homes, churches, schools, and workplaces about what it means to truly belong in a country that still struggles with race. People who had been silent about these issues felt inspired to speak up. Others who had never considered the weight of such words began to think differently. Her ability to stay calm while telling hard truths made it harder for others to dismiss what she was saying. In choosing to respond with grace instead of anger, she changed the narrative. The focus shifted from the cruelty of the insult to the wisdom of her reply. And in doing so, she reminded the country that how one responds to injustice can be just as important as the injustice itself. Her words reached across divisions and showed what true leadership looks like, not through power or position, but through poise, knowledge, and heart. The reaction from the public was immediate and intense after the racial insult was made, and then followed by a powerful response. People across the country were not just watching, they were talking, sharing, and reflecting. What could have been just another moment of hate was transformed into a nationwide discussion on race, representation, and the strength of character. Social media platforms were flooded with clips and quotes. People from different backgrounds, political views, and professions found themselves agreeing on one thing. The response had shifted the energy of the conversation. The insult itself was deeply offensive and painful. For many, it echoed a long history of racism, one in which people of African descent have been told, sometimes subtly, sometimes directly, that they do not belong. These words have been used to push people aside, to silence them, and to erase their place in the American story. But this time, something different happened. The moment did not end in silence or shame. It sparked a reaction that grew larger with every hour. Across news stations, analysts discussed the power of the response. Some highlighted the fact that responding with calm intelligence was more effective than fighting back with equal anger. Others pointed out that this moment revealed something about the country's deeper problems, how quickly racism can show itself, even in formal political spaces. But almost everyone agreed that the words spoken in reply were not just a defense. They were a challenge to the nation's conscience. In classrooms, teachers used the moment to talk about history and citizenship. They explained how the phrase, "go back to Africa," has been used for over a century to silence Black voices, even though many African Americans have generations of history in the United States, longer than many white families. The insult was not just a comment, it was an attempt to erase identity. But the response brought that identity back into focus and claimed it with pride. Religious leaders and community activists also joined the conversation. Sermons were given about dignity, resilience, and the power of using words to heal instead of harm. Faith leaders spoke about standing strong in the face of cruelty, and many referenced the response as a modern example of turning the other cheek while still speaking truth to power. Rather than walking away defeated, the speaker had turned the attack into a moment of teaching and unity. The reaction also included support from celebrities, athletes, and scholars. Influential voices on social media praised the courage and clarity of the reply. Some wrote about their own experiences being told they didn't belong, and how this moment made them feel seen. Others focused on the strength it takes to not let hate control the story. There was a sense of shared experience and solidarity, especially among those who had faced similar attacks in their own lives. Interestingly, the response also reached people who had never thought much about race or racism before. Some said they had never realized how common that kind of insult still was. The way the moment unfolded helped open their eyes. Because the reply was calm and thoughtful, not angry or aggressive, it allowed some people to listen when they might have tuned out before. It gave them a way to understand something painful without feeling personally attacked, which led to real learning. Media outlets continued to highlight the response for days. Editorials praised the use of reason over rage. Television anchors called it a turning point in public discourse. One journalist even said that the moment should be studied in leadership programs as a guide for responding to hate with strength. The more people heard the words spoken, the more they admired the self-control, insight, and emotional intelligence behind them. This public reaction showed something important, that the country is hungry for examples of how to respond to division and hate with grace and truth. The moment gave people hope that words still matter, and that calm strength can be more powerful than loud anger. It also reminded many Americans that the fight against racism is not only fought in the streets, but also in the halls of power, in conversations, and in how one responds to being disrespected. Perhaps most importantly, the moment reminded people that racism is still alive, but so is courage. The reaction proved that people are willing to stand up, speak out, and support those who show the strength to face hate with dignity. The speaker had not just defended herself, she had spoken for millions, and in doing so, turned a personal insult into a moment of national awakening. In the moments following the shocking insult, the attention of the entire room shifted. What began as a tense exchange quickly became something much deeper. It was no longer just about one person saying something offensive. It became about how the insult was handled and what that handling revealed about leadership, character, and the power of language. The one who had been targeted did not yell, did not return the insult, and did not walk away. Instead, there was a pause, a breath, and then a response that stunned everyone listening. That response changed the tone of the entire conversation. What made the reply so powerful was not just the words used, but the way they were delivered. The voice was steady, the message clear, and the tone dignified. There was no need for shouting or dramatic gestures. The response reminded everyone present, and later everyone watching, that strength does not always look like aggression. Sometimes it looks like restraint. Sometimes it looks like someone using truth as a shield instead of using anger as a weapon. The effect was immediate. People who had expected a shouting match were met with something entirely different. Instead of fueling more division, the reply brought silence to the room. A silence filled with respect, reflection, and, for some, even shame. It was a moment that taught a lesson about how to respond to hate without letting it change who you are. It showed that the person being attacked did not need to stoop to the level of the attacker to win the moment. This kind of response also reminded people of leaders throughout history who chose to stand firm without returning hate with hate. Many thought of civil rights leaders, educators, and activists who taught that dignity and truth can be louder than any insult. The room, filled with political figures and observers, became a classroom in that moment. It was a place where people saw the power of moral clarity, even under pressure. Some people in the room had not expected much from the person who was insulted. Perhaps they had formed opinions based on political party, background, or even race. But the response forced them to reconsider. They saw someone who did not crumble under attack but instead stood tall. They saw intelligence, self-control, and deep awareness of what the moment required. That shift in perception was visible in the faces of those watching, some nodding in agreement, some visibly moved. After the response, the conversation could not go back to the way it was before. Something had changed. The insult that was meant to wound had backfired. It had instead highlighted the wisdom and strength of the person who had been targeted. People in the room looked at one another as if realizing they had just witnessed something rare, an act of leadership in real time. This was not just a personal victory. It was also a lesson in how public figures can carry themselves with grace even in the face of cruelty. For younger people watching, it became an example of how to deal with disrespect. For those in the same room, it reminded them that every word and action is being watched and remembered. And for people who have faced similar words in their own lives, it gave a sense of pride and comfort to see such a strong and thoughtful reply. The room remained quiet for several moments after the response ended. That quiet said more than applause ever could. It was filled with thought. Even those who might have disagreed politically could not deny the power of what had just happened. Many later said it was one of the most memorable moments they had ever seen in that space. The insult had been real and ugly, but the response had been something else entirely. It had been a statement of who the speaker was and of the values they stood for. The person who spoke had made it clear that they would not be pushed out or made to feel small. They reminded everyone in the room that they belonged, not just in that moment, but in the larger American story. The message was not just about personal pride. It was about the pride of a community, a history, and a commitment to truth. It was about standing firm not just for oneself, but for everyone who had ever heard those same cruel words. That day, the room saw what true leadership looks like. It is not loud or boastful. It does not need to insult others to feel strong. Instead, it speaks when it must, and when it speaks, it lifts others up. It challenges hate not with more hate, but with purpose. And in doing so, it shows that the most powerful answer to ignorance is wisdom calmly spoken. The response to the insult did not just remain within the walls of the room, it echoed across the country. Videos of the moment spread quickly online, shared by people from many different backgrounds and political beliefs. It was not just the shocking nature of the insult that drew attention, but the way it was answered. For many Americans, watching the calm, thoughtful response made them reflect on what it means to lead with strength and respect, even when faced with cruelty. The nation's reaction showed how powerful words can be when used with purpose and clarity. Across social media platforms, people reacted with surprise, admiration, and even gratitude. They were not just supporting a person, they were supporting a way of handling conflict that inspired hope rather than hate. The way the insult was met reminded people of the importance of staying true to one's values, no matter how ugly the situation becomes. News channels picked up the story, not only to report the insult, but also to explore the meaning behind the response. Analysts discussed how rare it was to see such control and wisdom in the middle of a public confrontation. Commentators from both sides of the political spectrum agreed that the reply showed poise, emotional intelligence, and a deep understanding of the moment's weight. The insult was loud and painful, but the answer to it spoke even louder without needing to shout. This moment also opened up national conversations about racism, leadership, and who gets to be heard in politics. Many Americans shared personal stories of times they or their loved ones had faced similar words. They felt seen and represented by the response. It gave them pride and comfort to know that such words could be met with dignity, and even turned into an opportunity for education and strength. Teachers and community leaders began using the moment as a teaching tool. In classrooms, students watched the video and talked about what it means to respond to hate with principle. They learned that silence in the face of insult is not the only way to keep peace, and that speaking out with care and truth is sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do. The response became a case study, not just in politics, but in human behavior, emotional maturity, and ethical leadership. Many faith leaders also spoke about the event, praising the courage it took to respond with calm instead of anger. In sermons, newsletters, and community events, they used the story to encourage others to face hatred with grace and to keep their hearts steady even when attacked. People found meaning in the way the insult was turned into a moment of growth, not just for one person but for an entire country. Supporters, activists, and regular citizens also found renewed motivation. They saw that even in the most high-pressure situations, it is possible to hold on to dignity. They saw that when someone refuses to respond with the same level of hate, it forces others to reconsider their own behavior. The reply changed minds, not just in the room where it happened, but in homes, offices, and schools across the country. Some people even admitted that they had never thought deeply about how much words could hurt until they saw the pain in the moment, followed by the strength in the response. This powerful national reaction also reminded people that representation matters. Seeing someone from a historically underrepresented group answer such a demeaning insult with brilliance and self-control reminded Americans that leadership comes in many forms. It helped break down harmful stereotypes and encouraged others to believe in their ability to lead with their own voice, their own experiences, and their own sense of justice. What began as a cruel insult became something much more meaningful. It became a mirror for the country to see itself, both the parts that still need healing and the strength that lives in those who face disrespect every day. It taught a lesson in courage, not just for those in power, but for everyone who wants to make a difference with their words and their actions. The story continued to spread in unexpected places. Artists made paintings and poems about the moment. Youth organizations organized events to talk about identity, resilience, and leadership. Podcasts and talk shows discussed the deeper meaning behind the incident. People who might never have paid attention to political discussions before were now engaging in thoughtful conversations sparked by this one powerful moment. What was meant to silence and belittle had the opposite effect. It lifted a voice higher and gave others the courage to raise theirs. It reminded people of the power of responding with intelligence and restraint, even in the face of ignorance. And most importantly, it showed that when truth is spoken with grace, it can echo far beyond the moment. It can reach hearts, change minds, and inspire a nation.